We got Vaughn Hilliard standing by. Former Vice President Mike Pence, his break with Donald Trump on full display today when he campaigns for incumbent Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia. Georgia's primary election is tomorrow, and Kemp has pulled away from his Trump-backed challenger, David Perdue. Kemp is one of Trump's top targets after the governor refused, of course, to support the big lie. The Washington Post reports that the Republican Governors Association hatched a plan months ago to spend millions to defend incumbents against what one former governor called Trump's personal vendetta tour. The group has reportedly invested $5 million to defend Kemp in Georgia. Joining us now from Atlanta, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, I think Mike Pence getting a voice on all this, including the big lie, is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, Mika, we've talked now for how many years about at what point Republicans would band together to essentially push back against Donald Trump. And this moment here in 2022, it's finally happened. Brian Kemp is that figure, and perhaps it says polling. And when you look at the Fox News poll that came out late last week that shows Brian Kemp with a 60% to David Perdue's 28%, that provided them that opening here. This is the most notable, the most robust effort to beat back a Trump-backed candidate, dating back to 2016 when Donald Trump was that candidate himself. Not only will Vice President Pence be in town here today, but you've also seen the likes of Governor Doug Ducey from Arizona, Chris Christie, Governor Pete Ricketts out of Nebraska here. I know it's perhaps maybe not the most robust effort out there here, but if you think about over the last 6 years, you have not seen that sort of effort among incumbent Republicans coming into a state to help out a candidate and essentially defend one of their own. And that is what you have seen happen here. You know, I was out on the trail here with Brian Kemp and with David Perdue, and it's striking because David Perdue, the entire basis of his campaign, Mika, has been the 2020 election in this idea of the election conspiracies that have been propagated by the former president. But what you have seen, and based off of numerous conversations I've had with voters here, is that Georgian Republicans view Brian Kemp as one of them, as a conservative. And ultimately in November, Stacey Abrams is going to have her own race to run. But Brian Kemp, you know, from the election voting measure that he signed into law last year to the heartbeat bill that he signed into law in 2019, towards his pandemic response, you know, and the openings of business early on in 2020 compared to other states. Time and time again, you have heard Republican voters step up and say, Brian Kemp has served our state well, and perhaps they have questions about 2020. But to have that as the basis of a run for governor has not led them to ultimately vote for David Perdue. You also noticed in that Fox News polling, 37% of Republican voters said that Trump's endorsement made them more likely to support David Perdue. But put that into context here. We're talking about Republican voters here in the state of Georgia. And so, sure, it will give David Perdue a leg up, and he will be able to build off of that. But in a race against an incumbent governor, a popular one at that, it's not here enough in 2022. And that is what makes it striking about that question of just how potent is Donald Trump's influence in 2022 and beyond.
All right, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. We could also talk, of course, about Alabama, a state that Donald Trump said is one of his best, where people love him the most. He, of course, ditched Mo Brooks when Mo Brooks was down in the polls. Now, the latest poll has Mo Brooks pulling up, tied within the margin of error after being dumped by Donald Trump a couple of months ago. So again, these questions about whether Trump helps are even maybe hurting in these Republican polls. And Elise Jordan, let's look at Georgia for a second. This is so fascinating. Georgia, of all states, what we used to call, when I was born there, the Empire State of the South. Georgia becoming, is Elise there or not? Did Elise walk off the set? Because I was talking to Elise and I was just wondering why I wasn't seeing Elise, but now there's Elise.
There
Elise.
you go.
So
the
Georgia.
Empire State, that's a new one, but
yeah, I think that was a 60s thing, the Empire State of the South. So anyway, but Trump's Waterloo in 2020 was Georgia. It was what he couldn't get around. It may be his legal Waterloo being recorded on the phone saying, I need this number of votes. You need to go out and find it for me. That could be a problem. It was the GOP Senate's Waterloo in 2022 when Donald Trump went down to Georgia and pretty much handed the Senate to Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. Now we find ourselves in 2022. He's going to be humiliated there in the Peach State now. In the Peach State again in 2022. This is Mike Pence coming in to get his kick in. The Republican Governors Association getting their kicks in. I mean, it's pretty fascinating what's going on in Georgia and how this has turned out to be a very, very tough state for the former president.
it's almost like Donald Trump just doesn't understand Georgia politics. You look at what's going to happen probably tomorrow, and Brian Kemp has been a popular governor. To oust an incumbent is a tall order, and yet Donald Trump, because he, has no ego, he has no check on his ego, he thought he could do it. And you're going to look and see what happens tomorrow, and it's just, it's kind of amazing that David Perdue let himself be set up for this disaster. Did he really need this after also having Donald Trump basically concede his Senate seat already, in Georgia? So let's watch this one. But I'm wondering if Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, now that's the race. What's going to happen in the Secretary of State race tomorrow?
Of course, Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah,
Real quick, John.
he's up.